Welcome back to the War Academy, where the more you learn, the less you lose. This time we're going to go over why you suck at movement. Movement might seem simple, but you've probably heard a lot of people tell you that it's the most important part of the game. Honestly, I see a lot of people move their armies and it doesn't even look like they're moving for war. It looks like it's more of a pacifist movement.
You're a thing that babies suck on.
No, dude, that's a pedophile.
Tucker, I think he means a pacifier.
Oh, yeah, right.
Movement is one of the most important things of the game, and I see a lot of people who are moving their units like they're playing checkers at a family reunion and they're 6 beers deep. Well, I'm going to do my best to fix that for you today. First, we need to talk about threat ranges. First trick that you can do to just get better at 40k is just always assume your opponent's going to roll good and always assume you're going to roll like crap. So when I look at my opponent's units, I basically picture this little bubble around them, and the bubble is the no-no zone. So if I don't know, I'll ask my opponent, hey, what do those move? And he'll be like, oh, they just move 6 inches. So I go, okay, 6 plus 9, which I actually just think, 6 plus 10 is 16, minus 1 is 15. Okay, I need to stay 15 inches away from that model or he's gonna get me. But I don't apply the same rule to my models. I'm assuming, like, an average dice rolls a 7. And I'm assuming my opponent's gonna roll good, so that's why I give him a 9. But I'm assuming I'm gonna roll bad, so I give myself a 6. So it's my movement plus 6 is how far I can reach. If I have a 6-inch movement, I can reach you 12 inches. If he comes within ends of move within 12 inches of me, I know I got him.
Dad! I am not your dad. I am Electric Man.
And I know this makes it harder because he has a way bigger threat range than me. And that's not fair, but I play at the disadvantage to make sure all mine are working, and by giving him those 9s means that usually he's gonna have to roll a 9 or a 10 for his charges if I go stop right at the edge. And if I can get him to take those, that's when he fails charges, and when you fail charges, that's when you get stuck in the open and blown away by guns.
Bam! Peanut butter and jam!
So when you play this way, this is how you create the illusion of hot dice. So you all know those people that at your game stores, it's like, damn, they roll really good. But it's because they're preparing to roll badly and assuming you're gonna roll good, it creates this illusion that their dice are really hot, but they're actually just doing the math correctly. And that's the trick, just 9 inches plus movement out of your opponent. Don't go in that bubble unless you're willing to get charged. They'll have to come into your bubble, which means you're getting first attack and you're getting the charges.
Dude,
I warned you. I said I was going to do that if you did that again.
So you've heard the phrase ABC, always be charging. But always be charging, guys, does not mean always be moving. Just because your bike thing moves 12 inches doesn't mean you have to go 12 inches right at the enemy right away. That movement, that huge movement, tends to come way better late game. So if you're only moving a couple inches forward the first turn or second turn even, and yeah, you didn't use that huge movement you paid for, but you're hiding behind that wall, suddenly you can go reinforce the objective on the left side or the objective in the middle and just get there out of nowhere, and your opponent isn't ready for that, and now you're putting that extra resources there which your opponent has to deal with. And this is a trading game, so he's not prepared to make that trade. That's how you do clever things with movement, guys. But so many people are like, oh, I play Blood Angels. Well, how do you play Blood Angels? I run at the enemy and I hit them with my fist.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
It's like, no, a good Blood Angel player manages his threat zones, makes his opponent come into his threat zones, and absolutely wipes the floor with him. So we all love using the big units like the Lion and Satan, and even Great on Clean One is absolutely amazing unit. Generally, what you want to do is avoid the middle. The middle is the most dangerous place in the board that you can be. You're going to probably have to fight there, but don't put your most expensive stuff there. Your defensive combos and things go on that side. So when you're using these big units, you always have to be in mind how people are going to fight against you. So you get countered hard when you're isolated. Things like, the grenades or other mortal wound stratagems can a lot of times mess your day up. So that's why when you use a big unit, it's usually good to use 2 of them and use them like Super Smash Brothers was an old tactic that Chaos, they used to run. Mortarion and Magnus were together, and they were scary when they were next to each other. But like I mentioned before, if you got a Nightbringer and you put a Deceiver next to him, it becomes a lot harder to isolate because you got to deal with them both at the same time. And with Heroic Intervention, they can really cover each other. But a lot of people I see, they have their big units and they're like, oh, I'm gonna put one on this flank and one on this flank. And it's just not a good idea because they can't protect each other. But dealing with two of them at the same time, that's hard. Dealing with one at a time, that's manageable. It's all about how they cover each other. You can't isolate something that has a partner. And again, I cannot stress Heroic Intervene. The things you can do now with Heroic Intervene, guys. For example, this isn't about big units, but your little jump pack intercessors that do mortal wounds when they charge. If something charges something near them and you Heroic Intervene, you get to do your charge mortal wounds before any attackings happen. So even though you don't get to fight first, you can do a bunch of damage. So stuff like Tau Rampagers, their Heroic Intervene is scary as hell. But before we dive deeper into different tactics about the movement phase, guys, make sure that you like and subscribe. Just like the video. You're gonna be doing me a favor and it's gonna make you roll better because that's how karma works. Fact. Like, if you forget to like the video and I'll like it at the end, like pause right now. And otherwise you're risking rolling more ones. Like there's a good chance you'll roll more sixes by doing nice things. So be kind, like the video. And if you really need to build up that good karma, check out my Patreon because you don't make much money making Warhammer videos, guys. Like Warhammer's not a money making subject, but you can help me change that by joining the Patreon and then getting that real good karma.
Give me money, give me money, give me money, give me money, give me money.
All right, but we're gonna go down to how do we fight against big units?
Suck my unit.
So a lot of people have different tactics. Some people are like, oh, I just always make sure I include a strength 14 gun, which most armies have access to. A Predator tank, for example, is a strength 14 last cannon. You need to isolate and destroy them, or you need to ignore and contain them. Those are the two different ways. You don't want to, just dip your toe in with hurting them because you're gonna waste those shots. You're either gonna kill this thing, or you're going to just contain it and crowd control it. So there are things, for example, with battle line. Battle line are very good against some of these big monsters that don't have good weapons. So if there's a Mortarion on an objective, you can run onto the objective a lot of times with him, assuming he's not directly in the middle, and use your OC to take the objective from him, and then you just don't charge him. He can't heroically intervene into you unless there's a charge happening around him, but you'll stop him from scoring that primary, and then he has to destroy you, and then you can kind of do it again. So if you have something like even heavy intercessors are 100 points apiece, they're OC 10 with 15 wounds. Mortarion might not even get them all in one go. If he does, he's got to do that like 3 times just to break even on his point cost, and he's not actually scoring any primary. And that's a way that you can really crowd control them so you don't have to worry about them so much, and you can deal with the rest of their army. But the worst thing you can do is decide you want to go for something like Mortarion and then change your mind that he's not worth it later, because that's exactly what the Death Guard player wants you to do. So another way you can deal with them is if there is something like a big monster sitting on an objective and you can't really pull him off, you can put some bait in front of him and try to be like, oh, I'm right in front of you. Do you want to charge me, buddy? But charging you would just bring him off the objective. So exactly where you're standing. And you can kind of create a situation where it's like, all right, either you come off the objective and charge me, or I'm just going to sit here and keep shooting you every turn until you're gone. But yeah, just don't play into your opponent's game, guys. And you use the movement phases. Where you're standing is really, really, really important. And the best thing that you can do to make sure you're managing your movement correctly is really just manage your own threat ranges. Next up, we're gonna talk about Death Stars. So some of you may be thinking, Death Stars? This is supposed to be a 40k video. So let me actually explain what a Death Star is. It's kind of like an ogre.
Ogres are like onions.
In the fact that as you peel away the layers, it usually just ends up making you cry. So a Death Star in 40k is something that when people use giant, tightly packed units, you can put 1,000 points sometimes in a very, very small area. And you can do this all kinds of different ways. You could have a mini Death Star that say is 3 Dark Eldar Ravagers or 3 Predator tanks, and they move around together almost as like a squad. And it means that if I can see you, I can absolutely destroy you.
Kaboom.
Yes, Rico. Kaboom.
People lose their games a lot just because they went after the Land Raider Redeemer and they left it at 3 health remaining, and it doesn't really get bracketed, so then they're dead. It's very important when you move to make sure that you're finishing things off. So that's why if you have something like, you say 3 Predator tanks guarded by some melee things, and it moves forward and it just unleashes hell, and then you get your chance to move and shoot back at it, but you gotta kill all 3 of them or it's gonna basically unleash hell again. You get just 33% less if you manage to get one of them. And especially on maps like Dawn of War, where people tend to spread out their armies a lot more, having so much power in such a small little place really counters those spread out armies, because they can't respond in kind, where you're dealing with this little bit of their army and they're dealing with a lot more of your army at one time. And Death Stars are cool in that you can mix all kinds of different things. So you can have, doubled up Deathwing Knights with some Hellblasters in the middle of them or behind them. And you're basically moving this almost as like a giant squad. You can do things like, here's my 2 Satans that are running together with a squad of, cheap guys in front of them to screen and some destroyers behind them to cover them. They can all be moving together, kind of going for the same targets. This lets you do actions with the ones that aren't quite needed right now, or maybe you just have too much stuff there. It's always good in Pariah Nexus to have extra action monkeys. And the best part is that the heroic intervention is so good right now, where say I have my Deathwing Knights and I have 5 Deathwing Knights here, and someone comes at me with Death Company and Lamarties and the big combo, and then as he comes up, I can rapid ingress 5 more Deathwing Knights in. He charges the front 5. I heroic intervene with the other 5. He's dealing with 10 now, and all of a sudden his offense fails, and I wipe him out. Now, it does struggle against heavy MSU armies or armies with high attrition levels. And that's because you are usually spending a lot of points on a Death Star as you move it around. But so if someone brought nothing in their army that's worth more than 100 points, you are gonna kind of struggle as he just has too much stuff. But generally, he's not hitting you back as hard. But the MSU units can really slow down their movement by just moving in front of them. In general, Death Stars just seem to be doing very well in Pariah Nexus, a lot better than Leviathan. But movement isn't just about melee. A really important thing to do is to create overlapping fields of fire. And so many people look at shooting lanes wrong. The shooting lanes are there to see an objective. You don't need to see into your opponent's deployment zone or into his lines or anything like that. Because if you can't see him, then he can't see you either with those same things that you're trying to go for. But your opponent is trying to go towards the objectives. That's his goal. That's your goal too. So all you got to do is aim there. If you have a gun that can see objective A and see objective B from the place that it's standing, that's an amazing spot to put a shooting unit. Like, aim at those places and he'll come right into your fields of fire. And not to mention, if you wipe out a unit that's on objective A and haven't shot everything, the fact that you can still see in another objective means you'll probably have shots at something else too. It might not be the most ideal target, but it's the most important target, because if it's an enemy on an objective, it needs to go immediately. So just by knowing that you need to be aiming at the objectives, this is part of the steps that it is to just be better at playing ahead. So by just aiming at the points, that is playing ahead. There's no enemy there now, but I know there will be. That's playing ahead. Because this is part of what makes Warhammer so cool. Eric Forsman, who was on Team America for the WTC, he told me one of the coolest things that I've ever heard, that I'm quoting him right now. He told me that the next game of Warhammer that you play is going to be the best game you've ever played. And why is that? It's because never before have you had so much experience under your belt as the game that you are about to play. You're the best player you've ever been. You've got more experience than you've ever had. And that really experience comes down to you're better at playing ahead than you've ever been before, because you've seen it more than you've ever had. So with your melee that don't need to, aim their guns at the objectives, their job is to set up ambushes. And say you've got something like jump pack units that are hiding behind a wall, and they move 12 inches. Well, 12 plus 6, that's 18 inches. That's a huge bubble. That's 18 inches behind them, 18 inches right, 18 inches left, 18 inches forward. Somebody walks in that bubble.
Rick, where'd you get a hand grenade?
I don't know.
I'm gonna throw grenades at them, then do the Hammer of Wrath charge, and then chop them up with my chainswords. And when you guys lose your games, you'll notice a lot of times when I see people lose games is they didn't see an ambush that was behind this ruin or hiding over here, or even a deep strike ambush. So next I want to talk about Overwatch, because this is something that happens in your enemy's movement phase a lot of the time. And so many games I watch people and they're like, oh no, this thing's coming at me. Oh, I'm gonna overwatch it. That's the thing, is if you're overwatching as an oh shit button, you're doing it wrong. So one of the new things I think we're going to start to see in the meta is people including just a single flamethrower unit, whether that's the Tau flamethrower guys, or you've got, you know, a squad of aggressors is only like 100 points, and just putting one of those in your list. Like, that's why a lot of people love, you know, things like Redeemers. Guard do this really well with their chimeras all being packed with flamethrowers, but a flamethrower unit can hard counter a lot of the armies out there right now. Tau, Dark Eldar, Imperial Guard, anybody that's transporting a lot of infantry in something and they want to jump out and attack you. So the Tau come up with their Devilfish, they unload the Breachers, which are about to really mess up your day, but you have a squad of aggressors there, and now he ceases to exist.
Fire! 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 Fire!
Basically, he just paid all those points for an empty transport. Good for him. But in other situations too, you might have something like, oh, there's some Harlequins that are with your range just right behind that building. They're waiting to charge this objective. Suddenly, your flamethrower unit is there, and he's just gonna stand there. And his pure existence alone is making it so they can't do anything.
Can't touch me. Can't touch me.
But when you misuse Overwatch, like you try it over, it's like, oh, I only got 2 hit, and then none of them, they passed their saves, whatever, it didn't do anything. Like, dude, that could have been a free grenade. Grenade's one of the best stratagems in the game. That could have been a free reroll. You know, like, that's don't make those mistakes. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal when it happens, but it is a bigger deal towards the end of the game as it comes down to crunch time. But yeah, these flamethrower units set up huge charge denials. Normally in 40k, you're using, you know, melee units and screens and things for his charge denials, but just saying, hey, your lightly armored troopers cannot, those gene stealers, they don't want to come anywhere around here. And you reach 12 inches with flamethrowers now, so that's 12 inches again out to each direction, so you're covering a huge amount of space. And your opponent might not be stupid enough to walk into the flamethrower, but that means it's working too. Its existence is pain, and that scare tactic means you don't even have to spend a CP to actually do something, and you're getting value. So yeah, guys, I try throwing, you know, Tyranids, use those Pyrovores, like Space Marines, aggressors, just a simple one squad of aggressors in your army. It doesn't matter. It's, don't put characters with it. Don't do anything fancy to it. Just keep it base and cheap, and it'll do the job well. So another reason why people suck at moving is because they're complete score whores. The thing, I don't know why, like people will be like, oh, I took my Space Marine scouts and it's turn 1 and they got no cards that they can score turn 1, yet they still put the scouts on the objective right away.
Stop it. Get some help.
And what happens? Oh, I get to shoot at it with 2,000 points in my army. If my 2,000 points shoot a squad of scouts, what do you think's gonna happen? Like, why even take the scouts? They got you nothing. Absolutely nothing. If anything, you put the scouts in there and that let me be able to charge the objective, whereas otherwise I might not have made it there. And this is where Pariah Nexus gets really tricky, because I almost think, in my opinion, that we shouldn't be allowed to score cards turn 1, where it should be like primary, because it's so almost instigating. If you don't get any cards that are scoreable turn 1, that's really bad, because a lot of cards, unlike Leviathan, I feel like points are easier to get turn 1, but then there's still a good, you know, at least 30% chance that you're gonna get a bad hand turn 1. But if you can score, my rule of thumb is if I can only get 3 points turn 1 by, like, maybe I got area denial and then a crappy card, like, that's not worth going on to the objective turn 1. I really always want my opponent to be the one that sets foot on the objective first, so that way I can get extra movement on charges and set up exactly as much offense as I need to deal with whatever he has there. But if I can score at least 5 points turn 1, I will totally expose myself on the objective. Hopefully not get arrested, but I'll probably lose that unit. But 5 points is worth losing a unit, as long as I think even a 100-point unit I think is worth 5 points. But choose carefully, guys, when you're going to start the battle, because when you go out onto an objective, it's time to move your whole army out and expose everything. You're not hiding anything anymore. If your opponent's going to be able to shoot at one thing in your army, I want him to be able to shoot at pretty much everything in my army, because he's not going to be able to deal with it all, and that means everything in my army can shoot him next turn if he tries. And hopefully I can use bait correctly and use my movement phase correctly to control what it is that he's shooting at, even though he has good sight to everything. And that next turn is when I'm fully on him. But when I expose stuff, that's when I'm basically going all in, and it's the kitchen sink time. By kitchen sink, I mean I don't want it and I'm gonna throw it at him. But overall, points are much more important in Pariah. So being able to get, the games are a lot closer, secret missions are amazingly powerful, and games are kind of designed, I feel like, to be closer than they were before. WTC this year had a ton of draws, and that's because it's, like I said, games are less of a differential. That also means paint your armies, guys, because battle ready, paint your armies. You're not playing Chaos Grey Legion. But because points are more important in Pariah, this has made the CP redraw way more important than it's ever been. So not only can you do it more, you've got, I'm doing it all the time, and this is a bummer for some armies. It's more important, I feel like, than ever to bring something that can generate you CP. And the thing to think about when you're bringing those units like Azrael, it costs about 30 points in value to use a CP in general. So that means if you bring a character like Azrael who gives you a CP every turn, well, that means you need to be doing both your cards 3 turns out of your 5. Every time you discard a card, you get a CP, but not if you've already generated one. So every time you do discard a card and have Azrael, it's like you didn't have Azrael that turn. So Azrael needs to be the one to generate you CP for at least 3 turns for him to basically break even, because that's about 100 points in value that you're going to get out of him right there, and that's assuming he didn't, destroy anything in combat. But the battle really begins when somebody comes out first. Whoever goes out onto the objective first, that's when the battle gets intense. And the other player is usually going to be the one that gets to strike first because you came out first. And that's why it's important to screen and block people. So when something's coming at an objective, especially like a big scary monster, if there's a Mortarion coming at you and you've got, I got this half dead squad of guardsmen here, and I can just move right in front of Mortarion and try to take up as much space as I can. And yeah, he can go over my models, but he has to be able to land, and he can't land within an inch of me. And this can completely shut down people's movements. Like, you can't attack and then move. You have to move and then attack. And if you can't move, then you just lost your entire movement. You play against Elder, like, remember the web spinner things? Like, they just do -2 movement to you. And Elder, like, yeah, I'll pay 200 points for that. Well, you can eliminate something's movement by using your movement clever. A way people mess this up a lot is action monkeys are not screen guys. I'll see people, I'll be like, oh, that's your space marine list? Cool, who's your action monkeys? And they go, oh, my 2 scout units are. I'm like, okay, that's a good action monkey unit. Well, who's your screeners? Oh, well, I was planning on probably screening with the scouts. Do you see the problem in the logic here? For something to be an action monkey means that you're really intending it to live throughout the whole game. If anything, you're screening for it. And they're avoiding combat, not screening. Guys, they can't do both. I kind of talked ahead of my slide a little bit, but yeah, you need to move before attacking. That was blocking things like Mortarion, so we're just gonna move on. The other thing you can do with your screens that makes them so important is setting up that counter charge. So if I do have something like scouts, and the scouts absorb the charge, and behind those scouts is my squad of Deathwing Knights, or my jump pack intercessors, things that can, mess you up good. Like, in comes a Brutalis Dreadnought that's about to tank shock you too. Like, that's how you set up those counter charges. You block your opponent with these screens, and this is gonna make him not be able to move as far, so that you have plenty of movement to get a nice, easy, 5-inch charge that you're not gonna fail. And if you do manage to fail it, it's not so risky using a CP. But stop using CP, guys, to reroll 7-inch charges. That's not a good idea. That's a 50% of the time, it's gonna just fail on you. The best units, though, that are used for screening or even being an action monkey is your half-alive units. So if you have my heavy intercessors have lost 3 guys, so now they're a squad of 2. Oh, that's a juicy either action. It's not so much an action unit because it has to pass the battle shock, but it makes a great screen right now. You can just go up, get right in front of somebody, force them to have to charge it, and yeah, that can save you a lot of time. And it was just 2 heavy intercessors, because they've obviously already done something if they're only half there. And that's where it can come down to where, yeah, you could just shoot those heavy intercessors away, but that's a choice your opponent has to make. And if he's putting the guns required to destroy heavy intercessors into your heavy intercessors, well, that's less guns your Deathwing Knights have to worry about, or whatever it is that's actually holding the objective. And the more choices that you give your opponent, the more likely he's going to pick the wrong one. Give your opponent, though, there's a section of the board on every map that I call the dead zone. I would call it no man's land, but that's already a thing. And the dead zone is the place kind of in between your deployment zone and the objective, where if you were to charge a unit in the dead zone, it will 100% fully bring you off of the point. That's the juicy spot for ranged units to sit at. And this is why giving your opponent those more choices, like he's like, oh, I could deal with those Hellblasters right now, but you know, I would charge off the point. It's like, okay, I'll just put this little unit on it instead, which is something that you can easily deal with. And then he's overextending, he's out of position, you know, he's surrounded now because he's in your deployment zone almost, and they don't go over your side of the table. I don't have this in my slide, guys, but that's the main thing I always do. Like, there's really nothing for you on the other side of the table. Don't need to go for your opponent's home because that's all the way over there. It's literally the hardest objective that you can get. So even if you can pull some shenanigans and hold it, you're probably not going to hold it the whole freaking time unless you're fighting world leaders that have to like send something back to deal with you. Stop deep striking in your opponent's deployment. Deep strike on your side, hidden among all your things. And when your Inceptors come down, it's behind a unit of Deathwing Knights, so they're much harder to dig out. But if those Inceptors get to shoot the 4 turns out of 5 in the game, that's amazing. But people instead are like, I'm gonna go for the home, and then they go and they maybe temporarily take it, maybe even get lucky and you get 5 points off of it, and then they die because there's so much stuff that can see them and they're out of position, they're all alone and they're isolated. And that's exactly how I said to deal with big stuff. So if you can isolate small stuff, it's very freaking easy to get rid of them. So plan accordingly, fight on your side, make your opponent come to your side of the battlefield, guys. And I hope this was helpful. I know I tried to take a little bit different route with the movement, trying to talk about, you know, there's more things we could go up. Formations are huge, guys. I talked about formations in another video. Make sure you check those out. But I got videos on, you know, why you suck at Warhammer in general, why you suck at Tyranids. Definitely check out my channel. I think you're gonna like it. I try to make videos as fast as I can for you guys. It does take a lot of time, and you know, I make about $1 an hour doing it. So I'll keep making videos, but if you can help me out, check out my Patreon. And if I can make this worth my time, guys, I can record and make a PowerPoint every single day. It's the editing part that does take a lot of time. But don't forget to check out the rest of my channel, and I will see you guys in the next video.